Well, I think what put the capstone on was the last month of this presidential election. I think what happened was that Baron Trump got the ear of Trump and knew the podcast world, and Trump, being very entrepreneurial and a risk taker, decided to pay attention.
Yeah.
Because he picked a lot of podcasts that you'd only pick if you knew the podcast world. I think Rogan's an obvious choice because like he's the 800-pound gorilla, obviously. Although I'm not saying it wasn't courageous and wise of Trump to go on Rogan. Because,
no, basically no other politician would ever do a 3-hour unedited, sit down like that.
And there's certainly this delusion that I think the legacy media and perhaps even the Democrats are starting to realize, perhaps, that their consistent insistence that Rogan is a fringe figure and certainly like some kind of gateway to the right is ignorant and preposterous, both of those things.
Yet bizarrely true now also, right? Right?
Like but the thing is...
It shouldn't be.
He's a gateway to... It's the very strange version of the right.
Well, that's what they used to say about me. Because I left the left, but wait a minute, this guy's gay, he's still liberal, mostly pro-choice, like we could do the whole laundry list of things, but that I was just willing to talk to people. So then suddenly I'm talking to you, and then I was like, I'll talk to Shapiro. I'll talk to Glenn Beck. That's a scary guy. He's a crazy right-winger. I'll talk to Larry Elder, et cetera, et cetera. So then that's what people used to say to me all the time. You're the gateway drug. The funny thing about Rogan is if you see what the media is doing with him now, is the mainstream media is going, why is it that we don't have our own Rogan? Well, you idiots, you had him.
Yeah, no.
You had him.
Well,
you refused to talk about it, and you tried to get him kicked off. You tried to get him kicked off Spotify.
Did you see Greg Hurwitz made public this week? I thought that was really good. That message that because Greg was a very influential consultant to the Democrats and a messenger, very influential. And he sent them an invitation from all of us, essentially, back in 2017, saying, hey, the reason that none of you are on our shows is because you say no. It's not because you're not being invited. And I invited dozens of high-ranking Democrats to come on my podcast, and all of them said no. They would talk to me privately, but not publicly.
As recently as I believe it was last March when we were having the big bipartisan border deal fight. Remember that? There were 3 days of we're going to pass this bipartisan deal to deal with the border. Even though we don't need a law passed, it's obviously the president is allowed to deal with the border. We went to D.C. We hunkered down in a studio for a day in Rumble Studios. We invited 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats. 19 Republicans said yes. The only one who couldn't do it that day was Rand Paul because one of his staffers got stabbed on the street of D.C. That tells you everything you need to know about that. 19 of 20 Democrats did not respond. The only one who responded was Ilhan Omar, which was kind of hilarious. And she said no. But that tells you it right there. I am not thought of as a gotcha interviewer, right? That was the biggest knock on me for years is, Rubin's just going to throw you softballs. I was just interested in talking to people. But the idea that
that's Rogan too. Rogan's probably a little harsher than you, but he's not a gotcha interviewer ever.
No, but if you have the entire cultural apparatus, which the Democrats in essence had, and then you just think you can ignore the thing, you'll ignore it until you can't ignore it anymore. I think what's now happened is they cannot ignore it anymore.
That is exactly what happened.
If I was getting the views or you were getting the views that MSNBC were getting, I would consider a new career. I actually mean that at this point. We're blowing them out of the water. And I'm not telling you it's because I'm the best journalist in the world. I don't even consider myself a journalist. I tell people what I think. I see the news in the morning, and then partly because of being on tour with you, I try to do in the hour-long show that I do every day, I try to tell a story. I don't just try to say, there's 10 things going on. I try to loop it into some sort of narrative story. And you've met my producer, Phoenix, who you hugely helped in his own life. And then we started working together, and now we craft a story so that if people give me an hour of their day, which is an awful lot of time, 5 days, and I'm very aware of that. that. And I don't expect everyone to do it. And maybe you can only give me 5 minutes one day and one day you'll give me an hour or whatever it might be. But I want you to walk away with, oh, there's some context to what's going on here. Not just, okay, this guy said this and this one did this and
right,
just the endless, because otherwise we'll do that forever, right? We'll just do it forever. And I think by all of us having these conversations, by starting to find these alliances, by the left being so hysterical, and you may remember we were in Miami a couple years ago at a party in a backyard, and there was a big debate about what do we do. It was a lot of your friends, a lot of our friends, and there was a big debate about what do we do with the Democrats. And I kept saying they are not coming around. They are not coming around. And Greg was taking the counter position. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here because I would like them to come around. I think maybe now. You know, right. So it's going to be years now because they
have an opportunity now.
But there's an opportunity at least. He was going to take the destruction. And I think we have the destruction now. I don't know how haywire it goes on their side, but I think that was it. The only thing that people on the right did that somehow now makes Joe Rogan a Trump supporter is that they were willing to talk. That's it. Willing to talk and willing to question things. And then it got put on steroids with COVID.
It's so funny watching the MSNBC people do a post-mortem on what's their claim? The right's stranglehold on the new media.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't really call it a stranglehold when the reason it exists is because you wouldn't participate.
Right.
Right. And so you refuse to admit to the reality of the new technology, and you refuse to engage despite repeated good faith offers, like endlessly repeated good faith offers with people. It certainly wasn't inevitable that Rogan was going to transform into a Trump supporter.
No, they have themselves to blame.
Yeah, definitely.
They have absolutely themselves to blame. Look, when I got the offer for my first book, and we were on tour, we were in maybe we were in Copenhagen, I think, and I told you backstage, and of course, one of the rules is be happy for your friends when you hear good news. Slightly butchering it, and the way you smiled and slapped your hands, and you were sitting in a rotating chair, and I remember your chair fully spun around. You were so happy for me. That book, Don't Burn This Book, became a New York Times bestseller. It should have been like number 2 or 3, but they fiddle with the numbers. I don't even care about that. I mention that only because I could not get on MSNBC, CNN, or any mainstream media. Fox put me on constantly. So again, it's like
it's the same with 12 Rules. Like that was. I think that's the biggest selling nonfiction book in Canadian history. I think.
Yeah.
It's certainly close. And
they said you weren't published in the States,
that's the first thing. The New York Times never did put it on the list.
Right.
Never. And so that was pretty interesting. And then I had no mainstream media interviews about 12 Rules in the United States, like zero. Fox, yes.
Right.
Fox.
But then think about what happens. So then you do that unbelievable interview with Kathy Newman, right? And then suddenly this thing happens online. I mean, that Kathy Newman moment. Yeah. That was an unbelievably tear the internet in half moment for people that were paying attention. So now this huge well of support, it's support, it's love and it's hate and it's anger and it's confusion, all the emotions that anyone could have about any of this, that's happening online and it's being completely ignored on the mainstream. So now people
ignored enough so that Channel 4, which was the interview, actually posted the whole interview online without even, I think, a moment's consideration. That just stunned me that they did that.
Well, the best part of that was, didn't she, right after the interview, didn't she do a little selfie or something in her car where she was basically like, I sat down with this guy, it was no big deal or whatever. And then once she realized how sort of bad she looked, then of course she wanted to play the victim and everything else. But the point that I'm trying to show there is that there has been something going on online with the thing that's in all of our pockets all the time that we're all paying attention to, probably way too much time of the day. That was being completely ignored by the mainstream. And that's why when you say, well, what's going on at MSNBC, and they can't do a proper postmortem, and they're saying the Latinos are white supremacists, or the gays are white supremacists. It's like, because you guys you lied about everything and ignored all of us the entire time. Not only did you not have to do it, if they would have been, I bet you 10% better, we would not be in this situation right now. we would probably have Kamala Harris as the president-elect, because most people are willing to swallow a lot of shit. You know what I mean? Like, we all have our own problems, all of our own stuff, but they went so in on all of the lies. The fact that Barack Obama, 2 days before the election, gave a speech, I think it was in Wisconsin, where he said that Donald Trump went to a white supremacist rally and said there were very fine people on both sides. The fact that he ran with that hoax again after it has been debunked
by people who wouldn't debunk it unless it was seriously not true.
I think the first time that got to mainstream media was me on Real Time, because James Carville brought it up with Maher, and I had never heard it said on mainstream, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. And I said, what are you talking about? The next sentence out of his mouth was, but I'm not talking about the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis who should be condemned entirely. But Carville literally crumbles to the table because he did not know what to do when confronted with reality. And then Bill said, well, it was worded inarticulately or something to that effect. And I thought, well, that's an interesting way of playing a little bit of cleanup on that. But the point is, they thought, I think Obama, what would your psychological analysis of Obama be right there? It's 2 days before the election. He either believes it, which there's no way he could be that dumb and ignorant, simply impossible. But maybe you want to give him 5% chance. You want to give him 5%? What do you want to give him on that? Let's give him 20%, right? Okay, great, 20%. So he's unbelievably dumb and ignorant, and he ran the speech by nobody who's willing to confront him with reality. Or what would the only alternative be? He knows he can lie. It doesn't matter how big the lie is. And he thinks the lie will accomplish the goal, that the ends justify the means. I think they got to the end of that road. I think that's what this election was. You cannot tell us that there are very fine people on both sides. You can't tell us that Brett Kavanaugh is a serial rapist, or that the Covington kids are racist, or that Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist. I mean, we could do a million versions. That 6 foot social distancing was scientifically backed. And I think that's actually what this election was about. It really, Trump then became the avatar that was sort of wrapped around that thing. And then Kamala basically became the avatar for the machine.
We talked too about the fact that in the last month, a lot of radical things happened around Trump the last month.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the fact that this weird coalition gathered around him, which is, completely preposterous. It's completely preposterous.
Yeah.
That Elon Musk is now going to be running the Department of Governmental Efficiency, and that has the same acronym as Doge.
Yeah,
that was a coin, and it's a funny dog, and it's do only good every day. It's like, what the hell is going on here? And it's ridiculously comical that Musk is actually an X-Man, because that's the name of his platform, and that idea has been obsessing him for years, and that Gabbard is on board, and that Robert F. Kennedy came along, and that Vance is along, and so is Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, these are very unlikely Republicans, very unlikely. And so that's weird as hell. And it's like, seriously, surreally, this is Pulp Fiction weird. It's
so what
really
do you think the unifying principle is? To me, it's that they love America. Like, that's sort of like you would say, low resolution bumper sticker.
Too, and I think it's analogous in some ways on the political side to what happened with the media, the new media that we were describing. There wasn't anything really that we had in common. Let's say you and I, or Weinstein, or Rogan, Shapiro, like that. That was a very diverse group of people.
It was free speech in the most, I guess, in the essence.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was, well, I think the thing we had in common, essentially, was our approach to discourse.
Yeah.
That was really all.
Yeah.
I mean, each of us taken in pairs had things in common, but it was devotion to discourse, open discourse, conversational discourse, essentially.
Yeah.
And in a sense, on agenda-free conversational discourse. I mean, one of the things that makes Rogan so perennially popular is that he's just trying to figure out what's going on. And that really is the case.
Yeah.
And Rogan, that what you see is what you get. All the people in that group are exactly the same on camera and off.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's no persona. They're just exactly who they are. And all of those people were and are iconoclastic, right? They didn't fit well in organizations. They all started their own thing. Mm-hmm. And that's really the same thing that's characteristic of these people that have gathered around Trump. And then, as we alluded to, we also have this other strange occurrence, which is the death throes of the legacy media. most Douglas Murray, I talked to him the other day and he said, well, don't throw all of the legacy media under the bus. There is the New York Post, for example. The Fox News people are trying to do their best. And,
Sure.
you know, you have the Free Press with Barry, but that's new media too. So by and large, the liberal end of the legacy media have doomed themselves to perdition because they got partisan and deceitful.
Look,
and they were also willingly blind because they didn't pay attention to the new media at all.
Well, nobody could be that bad at their job. No janitor could be so horrible at his job and still have a job the next day. Joe Scarborough lies every day. He sits in a chair at MSNBC at a giant corporation to lie. Somebody up there, I don't know who his boss is, but somebody up the chain of the corporation knows that he's lying about all of these things. They know that Joy Reid is in essence a neo-racist, or that Rachel Maddow spent 3 years relentlessly lying about vaccines and COVID. So what people, I think, have to understand is they're paid to lie.
Well,
they are well paid to push a particular narrative.